On March 6, 1981, the Bill Lustig directed horror film Maniac was unleashed on the country. And some people were pissed.
The movie is Maniac.
Women's groups were pissed. Parents were pissed. Shop owners were painting over billboards. Gene Siskel walked out of a screening.
A disgusting horror show that forced me out of the theater after only 30 minutes. Maniac is a repulsive story of a berserk killer in New York.
Vincent Canby skewered the movie in his review. The LA Times refused to run ads, all because of a little low-budget 16mm horror film from New York made for less than $50,000. It even inspired a hit song in 1983. But let's back up. William Lustig was born on February 1st, 1955 in the Bronx, New York. His family later moved to New Jersey when he was in early childhood, but by the time he was in his teens, he was traveling back across the river to go down to 42nd Street, which in the late 60s and early 70s was the epicenter of exploitation and genre cinema for the less discerning movie-going crowd.
To heighten the horror, shock your senses, chill your brain. It could only be shown at midnight.
The term grindhouse comes from this era on 42nd Street, where you could see adult films, horror films, action, westerns, and even a few high-class dramas like Love Story, which Lustig claims to have viewed in one of the theaters there. But mostly you went there to see boobs, blood, violence, and whatever other lurid elements the filmmakers could pack into a 90-minute runtime. And young Bill Lustig watched all of it. By the time he was in his late teens, he was working on film sets as a PA and syncing dailies for movies like Death Wish in 1974. That's the process of matching up the audio to the film image, which were recorded separately and had to be synced so that the daily footage could be reviewed with sound. When talking about getting his foot in the door of the movie business, he said, "When you're willing to work for nothing, people will hire you." He even worked on adult films, and at the tender age of 21, directed his first grown-up picture, The Violation of Claudia. I wonder what happens in that one. Why do these titles have to be so cryptic? While working as a production assistant in 1973 on the Roy Scheider crime film The 7-Ups, he met someone that would help change the trajectory of his life, actor Joe Spinell. Spinell was nearly 20 years older than Lustig, and at the time had appeared in character roles in Cops and Robbers and even The Godfather. Later, he played parts in both Rocky and Taxi Driver.
You're gonna break my chops? You don't trouble with guys like you come in and break my chops all the time. If you're gonna break my chops, you can take it on the arches right now, you understand?
Sorry, sir, I didn't mean that.
Spinell was born Joseph J. Spagnuolo. I think I pronounced that right. In the 60s, when working for MGM, it was suggested that he change his name to Spinell to make it easier to pronounce. Lustig wanted to move beyond adult films, and in the late 70s, the idea was hatched. Let's make Jaws on land. Yeah, I wouldn't call Maniac Jaws on land. It really has nothing to do with it. But I've heard Lustig recount this little tidbit over and over again, so I guess maybe it's true. In developing the story of Maniac, the idea continued to gestate, and the character became more a compilation of 70s-era serial killers. Lustig said, the 70s were the golden age of serial killers. You had Ted Bundy, you had Son of Sam, all these guys running around in the 70s. Back then it was open season. You gotta find inspiration somewhere, I guess. Joe Spinell helped write the character of Frank Zito and bring him to disturbing life. Lustig said that he contributed all the murder suspense sequences, which were inspired by Italian horror filmmakers like Dario Argento and Mario Bava. And Joe Spinell contributed most of the elements of his character.
What will people say? What will we do?
With a script in hand, Joe, Bill, and producer Andy Garrone pulled their money together and came up with the film's initial budget, $48,000. $6,000 of that came from one of Joe's residual checks from the William Friedkin movie Cruisin', which he had worked on slightly before. As Lustig is fond of saying, they figured if they got the train to leave the station, other people would jump on board. They eventually ended up raising a grand total of $135,000 to complete the film. They needed someone to create the startling gore effects for the film, and Lustig wanted Tom Savini after seeing Dawn of the Dead in '78. He said he was blown away by Savini's effects in the film. Tom Savini was doing Friday the 13th in New Jersey, and Joe, Andy, and Bill all piled into a car after contacting him through the producers and visited him on set. Tom had just broken up with a girl in Pittsburgh and was not looking to go back there right away, so they offered him an apartment in New York if he would do Maniac. He was there 2 months before filming started, and they brainstormed a lot of ideas for the grisly effects in the film. They used a pre-existing bust of his head for the shotgun scene because he was getting a nose job and it wouldn't match anymore. That's how he got the part of Disco Boy.
Does it come here a lot?
It's often said that the filming of Maniac was stolen on the streets of New York, meaning they shot without required permits. But according to Bill Lustig, most of the movie was actually shot with permits. But in the city at that time, it was much easier and essentially free to legally shoot a movie, as long as you filed the proper paperwork. They didn't, however, get a permit for the famous exploding head scene, and actually fired off a live shotgun on a Saturday night next to the Bell Parkway in New York City. They used the latex bust of Savini and just filled it with fake blood and whatever they could find on the craft services cart. Just to be clear, it's illegal to discharge a shotgun next to the Bell Parkway in New York City. They saved that shot for last and got the hell out of there as quickly as possible afterward. Lustig said that he had a production assistant standing by with his car. They shot the scene with 3 cameras running simultaneously. Savini himself doubled for Joe Spinell and was the one actually jumping on the hood and firing the gun at the dummy head. Apparently, the hood of the car had become pretty damn slick from the residue of the toxic mixture coming out of the old school fog machine, and Savini slipped after the gun went off. Concerned for the shotgun, Lustig rushed over and grabbed it from Savini, who was on the ground. He quickly went over to the waiting PA, threw it in the trunk of the car and said, "Get this out of here, go to Jersey." The PA complied. At least that's the way the story's told. The cops never got involved. But the production was less worried about the cops and more worried about pissing off the film unions or the Teamsters. The crew was told that if anyone asked, to say that they were NYU film students, hoping to avoid the issue. They also used a working title during production. The slates, scripts, and anything official coming from the production used the title On the Run. I guess mostly to not give anyone pause about allowing use of a location or helping out with the film in any way. They always intended on calling it Maniac, though. Fun little bit of advice for any aspiring filmmakers out there. Instead of something like Blood Parade 3, The Beheadinator, emblazoned on your scripts and slates, try something like A Walk in the Park. Then maybe the nice old lady who agreed to let you shoot in her backyard won't notice when you rip off your stunt dummy's head with a dog chain attached to a four-wheeler and drag it down Main Street. Worth a try. Carolyn Monroe said that when she first saw the finished film, she had a mixed reaction. She thought it was really well done, but it didn't really have many light moments, though. Well, we all seem to be talking about the same movie, I guess. She was born in England. Don't ask me where. The only thing I know about the British landscape is that they seem to make a big deal about a tower with a clock in it. She had an interest in art when she was a teenager, And when she was about 16, an art class friend asked if he could take some pictures of her. With her mom's blessing, they sent them to a fancy schmancy photography competition and won. Carolyn said that kind of set her off on the path to modeling. She ended up doing a photo campaign for a popular British rum for 12 years. Wait, did she start the rum campaign when she was 16? Seems inappropriate to me. And I should know because I'm the supreme arbiter of appropriateness. Ask anyone. At one point, a casting agent came to the modeling agency that represented her and picked several of the top girls for an upcoming film. Turned out to be the original Casino Royale starring David Niven as James Bond in 1967. The models worked as glorified extras. She met Joe Spinell on the set of the 1978 sci-fi film Star Crash, helmed by Luigi Cozzi. She played Stella Starr, and Spinell played Count Zartharn. The two hit it off. Caroline said that Joe was an amazing man to be around. To quote her, "He really lived life. He loved life." Monroe wasn't originally intended to be in Maniac. Originally cast in the role was Daria Nicolodi, who collaborated on several projects with Italian filmmaker Dario Argento, including creating Asia Argento. Why did I put it like that? Moving on. Nicolodi couldn't make it because of another commitment in Italy, and they asked Monroe to take the part of Anna D'Antoni, and the next day she said yes. That weekend, Lustig took her to see John Carpenter's Halloween to show her what kind of movie he had wanted to make. At the time, most of her experience had been in Hammer films, and he wanted her to be prepared for what they were trying to achieve. During the making of the movie, it was Monroe's husband, Judd Hamilton, who helped come up with the finishing funds. The music for Maniac was composed by Jay Chataway. He started out young in music, doing jazz arrangements when he was in the 8th grade. He got a master's degree in music and then joined the Navy during Vietnam and became chief arranger with the U.S. Navy Band. Later, he worked with jazz trumpet player Maynard Ferguson and eventually produced an album for him that included music from the movie Rocky. And that became the hit record version of it. That led him to more work as an arranger and a composer. While working as a producer at CBS Records in New York, he was approached by producer Andy Garoni, who asked him if he thought there were any artists on his label who might be interested in writing music for Maniac. Chataway said he might actually be interested. So they arranged a screening of the rough cut right off of the Moviola with Bill, Andy, and the editor Larry Marinelli, who went by Lorenzo at the time. Joe Spinell was there too. Chataway said that he wasn't really a big fan of that genre of films, but he responded positively to the energy of the filmmakers. He told them he was interested. They asked him if he had done any horror films, and he said, "No, I've not really done any films, but I know how to do it." He and Bill Lustig sat in his apartment for days combing over Bill's extensive collection of Ennio Morricone film scores on vinyl. It gave Chataway a good idea of where Bill was coming from with his sensibilities. They didn't use temp music as they were cutting the picture, so Chataway was making it up from whole cloth as the editing progressed. He played the theme for Lustig, and his response was, "That's great. I never would have thought of that." It was a more gentle approach. As Chataway says, gentle but warped. Bill Lustig talked about finishing the sound mix for the movie. He said, "I went to the highest end audio facility in New York, which happened to be about 4 blocks from my apartment. I'll take your downtime," I said. When someone is working on a project, often the studio goes empty because they're trying to finalize a reel or something, and the studio doesn't charge for that downtime. So I said, how about I take the downtime to mix the movie Maniac? So I got access to their biggest studio and mixed Maniac in Dolby Stereo. This was 1980, when very few films were mixed in Dolby Stereo, let alone low-budget independent film.
Cut!
So when we go to premiere it at Cannes, I wanted to play it at a Dolby Stereo theater, which at the time were only the big theaters at Cannes. And the sales agent said, no, we have to play it at the smallest theater. And it was a brilliant marketing move because when we premiered it, many of the buyers and distributors were turned away. They said you couldn't get in because there wasn't enough room. Plus, he loaded it with local kids to sit among the distributors getting their reaction to the movie. Between the two things, it created a buzz at Cannes. They tried to find a distributor in LA and screen the movie for legendary exploitation producer Roger Corman at New World Pictures. Lustig described the famously thrifty Corman screening room as a utility closet with a bedsheet nailed to the wall. Roger watched the first reel and the last reel and gave Lustig a pitch. Cut it to an R and I'll distribute it. The film was eventually released unrated. One of the most enthusiastic LA players that seemed to really want to make a deal to release the film was a guy named Ed Montaro, whose company was called Film Ventures International. They had released movies like Grizzly, Day of the Animals, and the Italian version of Beyond the Door.
Who are you? Jessica has gone beyond the door. At first, she didn't believe, but she does now.
Lustig describes Montero as an interesting guy and a falling down drunk. He made a generous offer, but they screened the film back in New York for Analysis Film Corporation, a company that mostly released foreign art films, but had been hounding them to see the movie. After the screening, the rep from Analysis called immediately from the screening room and said that they would top any offer they had. They went with Analysis. Lustig and his producer Garrone thought that releasing the movie under a more prestigious banner would perhaps elevate the film in a way, but ultimately it had a boomerang effect because notable newspaper film critics who would usually pass on low-budget horror films actually reviewed the film and were pretty damn vicious with their reviews. Here's a few quick excerpts from New York Times critic Vincent Canby. Good sense, if not heaven, should protect anyone who thinks he likes horror films from wasting a price of admission on Maniac, a movie that shows how an aging, pot-bellied maniac slices up young women of no great intelligence. Later in the review, he describes Spinell's character. He is terrible in all capacities, though his performance is more immediately objectionable. Watching him act like a psychopathic killer with a mommy complex is like watching someone else throw up. It sounds like he didn't like it. But as Bill Lustig said, this was not a movie for them. The movie did get a lot of attention. Prior to releasing, they placed a full-page ad in the New York Times, which was rare for a low-budget horror film. When Lustig had suggested the idea of placing an ad to Ed Montero, he responded, Lustig, your audience either lives on or under the New York Times. The backlash was so swift and severe that the LA Times banned the movie from even running an ad. According to Lustig, Maniac was the only movie that they ever banned. The old adage, there's no such thing as bad publicity, actually didn't hold up in the case of Maniac's theatrical run.
The movie the LA Times wouldn't run ads for. Now President Eleanor Spinell had this reaction to the billboard.
All I can say is that when you talk about violence towards women and brutality, this just typifies it, and I think that it is shocking and it contributes to the injury of women.
Because of protests and angry phone calls, a lot of movie theaters pulled the movie after a week or two, which substantially hurt the bottom line for the distributor, Analysis.
I think it's sick, it's perverted, and I just want to stop things like that.
But the film did well on its initial theatrical run around the world and found an even wider audience on home video. It helped launch Bill Lustig's career and made Joe Spinell a horror movie legend. I think it's a testament that a movie made for so little money so long ago still has people talking about it. I mean, here I am digging into the details, but I think it's a testament to the enthusiasm of the filmmakers who put this movie together at a time when these kinds of movies were really starting to get recognized as their own sort of art form. Bill Lustig saw it. And so did a new generation of filmmakers that turned B movies into the mainstay of the industry with sci-fi, horror, fantasy, crime films. They took those genre movies off of 42nd Street and put them in multiplexes all across the world. And I, for one, am pretty glad that they did. All right, stay tuned to this channel. Lots more deep dives coming soon. Dread Diver out.